Hi, welcome back to Bounce Forward with me, Tiff Hall. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Welcome to part 2 of my chat. We're going to pick up right where we left off. What about in a mental sense, like for your mental health? Do you meditate? What kind of things do you do to keep your mental health really
fit? That's a really good question. I would categorize myself as an extroverted introvert. So I love, palling around with friends and having a really good chat and all of that. But it just means that I need time to myself to recharge that social battery at the end of a long day or after an event or something like that. So one thing that's really important to me is my home life. So making sure that I've created a space that I feel is safe and calm and is always going to make me feel like I can just close the front door, sit down, in my underpants and just be. I feel very lucky that I've been able to create that for myself, but it's also been a priority of mine. Another part of it is therapy. That's an essential for me. I have a really great relationship with my therapist, and I started with her before Masterchef. And I said to her, I need you to help me by knowing what I'm like, what my baseline is like before this whole thing blows up, because, obviously
that's good. Yeah.
I'm a journalist. It's my job to think about things. I have had the benefit of watching the former judges go through that whole experience. So I knew that it would be not dissimilar to that. So I wanted to have someone with me who knows who I am now, but also knew who I was before that, just to see how those changes might impact my mental health. So I feel like that's been something that I've, I checked that box. I did that thing right for myself, which was really, really good. But I also find moving really helps. So exercise is a huge part of my my mental health plan as well. So
tell me about that.
Yeah,
because I know that you're dabbling in a bit of Brazilian Jujitsu, and I've been dying to ask you about this because I do Taekwondo.
Yeah, I know.
In Taekwondo, and I love it. And that's how I keep my hubby in line. You're on Have You Been Paying Attention? You did such a great job. My husband's Ed Cavalier, the naughty one up in the corner.
Oh, I know. And, I'm aware.
Yeah, he's scared of me, which is the way I like it. And I just wanted to ask you, where does your love of martial arts come from? How are you finding it?
Well, I was thinking about it. So I started jiu-jitsu because I love watching mixed martial arts. It's a real thing that it gives me a lot of joy. I feel like there's so much skill involved in in mastering more than one sport and then pulling them out of your kit bag as you need to read your opponent and to be able to dominate in that situation. I just find that it's human chess. I feel like that's such an intellectual pursuit as much. Yeah, as much as a physiological thing, these are athletes at the top of their game. They're also having to kind of work with a moving puzzle. And so I started jiu-jitsu because grappling, ground control is a little bit harder to kind of understand the nuance of. When you're looking at striking as somebody who doesn't know much about martial arts, you can say, okay, well, I can see that this person's winning because they're landing more punches or whatever it happens to be. But jiu-jitsu is one of the most useful parts of mixed martial arts. If you're, if you want to be at the top of your game, you need to have some decent wrestling skills. So that's how I started. And funnily enough, another comedian, Nazim Hussain, who's a good friend of mine, has been doing jiu-jitsu for a couple of years. And he said, well, one of my coaches, his wife is also a black belt in jiu-jitsu and also coaches. Maybe you want to meet her. And so Livy Giles and I met, and we've become really great mates. And so it started with doing one-on-one coaching, and now I'm rolling a couple of times a week. And it is something that is really good for my brain because you have to be fully present with it. And I always come away from class feeling better than when I walked in the door. And so for me, that is a sign of something that you should be doing on a regular basis. So I really love it.
So true. I love the
Yeah.
presence that you need with martial arts. It is
Yep.
just that clarity, that presence. It's beautiful. And are
Yeah.
you doing something with the UFC at the moment?
Yeah, I've been working on and off with Foxtel over this last year with fighter interviews. So I guest hosted Fight Week for Foxtel back in January, which was amazing, alongside your co-star from Gladiators, Tyson Pedro, who's like such a sweetheart.
Yes.
And also Dan Hooker, who recently won his fight at UFC 305 in Perth. Amazing guy too. And so I got to work with them on that. And it sort of snowballed from there. I did a profile interview with Israel Adesanya ahead of his fight at UFC in Perth. And then I did the post-ceremonial weigh-in interviews with Nick from Foxtel as well. So it's just peppered throughout the year that I get to do these things. And for me, the psychology of martial arts, the psychology of athletes is something that I am utterly fascinated with, in the same way that when I talk to contestants on Dessert Masters or Masterchef, I am really interested in human psychology. I'm really interested in purpose and passion. And when people feel comfortable enough to share their stories with me, that's a good day.
So, Melissa, you are one of the most passionate women about food. Where does this passion come from? How did you get into food?
I think for me, food is the gateway to knowing yourself and to knowing other people. So I have found that over the years of loving food and talking to people about food, I get to know so much about them. So it's kind of almost been an accident that I've ended up in a career in food in a way, because food has just always been part of the dialogue for me. But I from a career perspective, accidentally fell into food because I was working in advertising, and it was at the beginning of social media. I know that people sort of struggle to remember what life was like before the digital age.
I know. I remember it's so weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very strange. And I'm really glad that we had that time.
Yes.
But I started working in advertising around the beginning of social media. And so we were encouraged to be on different platforms, engaging with I guess, potential customers, potential clients for the brands that we were working for. And so I chose food because I didn't want to spend too much time reaching or researching for content. I just sort of wanted to just dive in and just sort of get going with engaging with people. So it just sort of started as a little bit of an accident, if I'm honest with you. I started a blog. I started sort of talking to people about food online, and one of my friends was an editor for Street Press, and up in Sydney, it was called 3D World. And he said, well, we have been wanting to revamp like a little food column. And, you know, it was designed for uni students, and it was about cheap eats and things like that. So I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. You know, I love the audacity that we have when we're young to just, you know, do things. And so I started writing a food column. And then at the time, Time Out Sydney launched, and I cold emailed the food editor and I said, hey, I've been food writing for a little bit. Would I be able to write for you? And she said yes. She gave me my first assignment, and off I went. And it was just a thread that was pulled from there, because as I got to know people in the industry from a journalistic point of view, I was trained by some amazing editors and publishers along the way. So I kind of really was given a lot of tough love to grow the critical side of the way that I articulate food, the way that I could channel my voice in a way that felt like me. And then the other side of things was, you know, meeting a lot of people in food and kind of just, I guess, getting a contact high from how passionate they were about who they are, their identity through food, and the way that culture comes to life. Because you can travel to a country in the world that you don't speak the language, you don't understand anything that's going on, but the second you take a bite, that's when you can start to get a feeling for where you are and who these people are that are surrounding you. And I feel like that is such a powerful proposition. So the fact that I get to call that a big chunk of my working life is a massive blessing.
Melissa, that is just amazing. Thank you so much for joining me on Bounce Forward. I've learned so much, and I would love to do some jiu-jitsu one day, and I would love to, because I've always done taekwondo.
Yeah.
And I've dabbled in, we do teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit of ground control, because 80%, 90% of fights end up on the ground and you need to be able to know a little bit. But I've always thought, maybe Tiff, it's time. You need to do some BJJ. I'm not sure. I
feel like, you're a black belt already. You've got the fighter mindset. You've got the commitment mindset. I know you'd be amazing at it.
I don't know, but I would love to try it. So maybe we could do it one day. I'm not sure. But yeah, thank you so much, Melissa, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Bounce Forward. Hey, I love having your company, so please DM me on Instagram at tiffhall_XO and let me know what topics or questions you'd love me to cover. Don't forget to rate and review me on your podcast app. Speak soon. Happy days.